Welcome back to the Wargrove of Woe. In today's video, I'll be breaking down the lore and abilities of the Idoneth Deepkin subfactions. And for the art for today's video, there will be pictures of what the subfactions Alopex riders would look like, as well as a picture of the subfactions capital if I was able to find it. First up is the lonrach. Their army-wide ability is +1 to cast and unbind, and their command trait is allies or allied units get access to the Tides of Death ability, or the Tides of Death alliance ability. For their lore, they are the largest and most expansive enclave, and they are the least isolationist of the Deepkin. They can be found in every mortal realm, and are often seen allying and reaching out to other non-Deepkin races. This is also the enclave in which High King Volturnus comes from, so if you really enjoyed that character, this is where he comes from. On the tabletop, this is a very interesting faction. It's really only limited by your creativity. Tides of Death is one of the best rules available to the Deepkin, and it's what gives them so much bite. The Tides of Death is kind of why Deepkin are still so good, even though they only have a first edition codex. Or excuse me, battle tome. And being able to put that Tides of Death table on any unit you can ally in is really cool, and it gives you a lot of options that you can explore and theory craft and play with. The other thing, the +1 to cast and unbind, is fine. Generally speaking, pluses to cast and unbind are really powerful, but Deepkin spells are kind of meh, so the +1 is less useful than otherwise, but it's still nice to have. You can always use it to get more reliable Mystic Shields off or whatever else you'd use them for. So overall rating, I'd give them an A. Next up we have Domhain. Their army-wide ability is they can reroll hit rolls of 1 for Achillean and Namarti units if those units have charged. And also, you can reroll failed wound rolls for Achillean units if they target a monster. So the lore of this enclave is that they are seen by the other Deepkin as primitive and bestial, focusing more on their beast bond, or their bonded beasts. See, that's a typo, excuse me. The Domhain also no longer attend the Sembrals, which are occasional meetings between the different Deepkin enclaves that tentatively bind them together. It's kind of when they all get together to discuss things. This subfaction no longer attends those, so they've even cut off ties to their own race. I've written down that this is a fairly middle of the road faction, but I think I'm going to change that after a quick review. I think that they are probably one of the better subfactions because of the rerolling wounds to monsters. That is a very strong buff, especially in 3rd edition when monsters are king. So getting rid of your opponent's monsters is very powerful. In 2nd edition, I would say they were pretty middle of the road, but 3rd edition with monsters being so prevalent, the wound rerolls are pretty powerful. So I would change the rating that you see on screen to a B+ or an A-. The only reason that I give it kind of a lowish score is conditional buffs or conditional things tend to be hit or miss. It all depends on how easy it is to get that condition to happen. Because like if your opponent does not have any beasts, that really powerful ability that this subfaction has is useless. So take what I say about this subfaction with a grain of salt. It can be really strong, but it can also kind of be okay. Next up we have the Fuethan. They're pretty interesting. Their army-wide ability is if they are in the Flood Tides section of the Tides of Death ability, they reroll hit rolls of 1. And also, the Ebb Tide is replaced with Flood Tide. So if you don't know, Flood Tide lets Deepkin units run and charge or run and shoot. And so just getting extra bonuses out of that is really yet nice, and getting a second Flood Tide is pretty useful to make your units a whole lot more mobile. Additionally, you can reroll wound rolls of 1 for their mounts. So their eels, their sharks, the giant turtle, the really strong mount options that the Deepkin have access to, you get a buff for them. For their lore, they are known for being bold, aggressive, and quick to anger, and they live almost exclusively in the realm of fire, Akshi, so it's pretty fitting for why they would be bold, aggressive, and quick to anger. In tabletop, they're very mobile, and Deepkin units tend to be very fast. So, or not, excuse me, not very. They are fast, but the mounts tend to be powerful. So, I'd say this is a pretty strong subfaction. If this is something that you'd be interested in, having a very mobile hit and run style of faction, then this one's all for you though. Next up is Morphane. This is a really interesting one. I'm not sure if it's very popular. Just kind of on base review, it seems really strong. Their army-wide ability is you add 3 to the number of models brought back by the Soul Renders. And so if you didn't know, Soul Renders are hero units that can bring back Namarti units from death, depending on a few factors, but this umps that up a significant degree. They also get access to a unique spell. So Soul Renders know Freezing Mist instead of one of the Lores of Deep that you can pick from. And Freezing Mist is okay. An enemy unit within 12 can only pile in 1 inch. So the lore of the Morphane is that they are secretive even by the standards of the already secretive Deepkin. They tend to be very focused, calm, and collected, very kind of somber-esque. They remind me of Grand Alliance Death armies if they were. It has the same aesthetic. Their city, their capital, is often wreathed in mist, and they're very secretive. So it's just kind of that's a connection I draw with the subfaction. That doesn't have to mean that that's what you get out of it, but they are really interesting. On the tabletop, this is your Namarti Horde subfaction, so if you just want to run a whole bunch of infantry and a whole bunch of Namartis, this is the one you want to do. You get some Soul Renders as sitting behind your Namartis, and you can have them stay alive significantly longer. The unique spell is pretty good. Limiting the amount of movement an enemy can pile in can be extremely valuable, but you just need to know how to use it, or you got to understand when that'll come into play. Because oftentimes if you have, say, you're going up against a unit of 5 elite infantry, and they're already at your line, making them not be able to pile in 1 inch isn't as valuable as you might think, but it has some value. I would give them an A- rating. Now here is the creme de la creme. These guys I think are really slept on. If not a bit generalist. Their army-wide ability is they reroll failed hit rolls if you've made a charge move, which is very powerful. And they have a unique spell for Tidecasters known as Protective Barrier. And this is awesome. Like, this just kind of caught me by surprise. You target a friendly unit and worsen the rend characteristic for all attacks that target that friendly unit. And the kicker here is it has a casting value of 4. So rolling 2d6 and you get a 4+, it goes off. And that is one of the lowest, if not the lowest, casting values I've seen in a long time. So it's very powerful and very reliable. So these guys have a really interesting lore. They are the best Deepkin craftsmen and smiths, and they are renowned for being able to shape like chitin or shells or other materials that you'd find in an underwater ecosystem into armor. And another interesting thing is their capital is built on the back of a giant crustacean that moves around. You can see that in the picture that it's kind of built on the back of this ginormous thing. Um, and the Nautilar as a people are very defensive with skilled tidecasters. On the tabletop, the buff and the magic you get are pretty strong. AOS 3.0 is all about rend. So if you can weaken enemy rend, that's very powerful. Just ask Petrifex Elite Osiarch Bone Reapers. They like having their ability to weaken rend. Getting full rerolls to hit on the charge is the same thing that other factions get, but it's better because you can reroll everything and it's not conditional. So that's really powerful. I would give this an A+. I think this is one of the best ones to run. But of course, take my rating with a grain of salt. That's just my opinion. And also, I don't personally play Deepkin. This is just from my analysis. Last but most certainly least is Briomdar. These guys are kind of really bad. Their army abilities is Soul Scryers can bring 3 units with them instead of 2, and set them up wholly within 18 instead of 12. So if you don't know, Soul Scryers can do like a pseudo deep strike move where when you deploy, you can have the Soul Scryer be off to the side and you can deep strike or put them anywhere on the board outside of 9 inches of an enemy. So I really don't like abilities like this. I find them lackluster in all sense of the word. Um, so buffing a lackluster ability doesn't really do much for me. Secondly is all units ignore terrain, but they do not get the fly keyword. So if your group plays with a lot of terrain, that could potentially be useful, but in AOS, terrain isn't nearly as important as in 40k, for example. I wasn't able to find too much lore on these guys, but what I did find is that they live in Ghyran and are master ambushers. They've also helped the Sylvaneth fight against Nurgle on a few occasions, but it's unsure if that was out of self-defense or for any actual intent to ally with the Sylvaneth. These are incredibly weak. This subfaction is outshined by every single option. I don't see any good reason to run them. But if you enjoy Soul Scryers and you want to have pseudo deep strike abilities, then by all means run this faction. But I think there's a whole lot more that you can get out of the other sub-factions. And that was all of these sub-factions and their lore broken down for the Idoneth Deepkin. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like or a comment and consider subscribing. If you didn't, leave a dislike. If you enjoy these types of videos that I've started putting out, the sub-faction breakdown as well as including some lore, please let me know or give some feedback or suggestions in the comments below. And if you have any ideas for future videos or concepts you'd like me to see, also let me know. This has been the War Grove of Will, and I'll see you next time.